Hi guys and welcome back. In this video we're going to be writing some more tests for the printer just to give you a bit more practice and show you a couple more things. Let's begin by writing a test for printing outside capacity. Like we did earlier, we will do with self.assert raises, and now it'll be a printer error that we're gonna catch. We'll do self.printer.print 301. Notice that we printed 25 pages in this test. So here we could in theory do 276 in order to still breach capacity. No, that's absolutely not correct. I hope that you didn't believe me there. You're getting a new printer for each test because we've got this setup and not setup class. Remember, exactly what I said there, this dependency between two tests is a bad thing. You do not want that. Okay? So you do need 301 pages in order to breach capacity because this printer is a new printer related to this one. Okay? So this should raise a printer error. And indeed, as we save the file, these tests run and you get 2 out of 2. Notice that if we do 276, the test fails there because the printer is a new printer. Okay? So it says printer error not raised. Hope you didn't believe me there. So next one is we are going to print the exact capacity. So we'll say test print the exact capacity. And we will do self.printer.print self.printer.capacity. Now this is a private property, or at least a property that has an underscore in front of it. So in theory, you should not use it. But really what it means in Python is you should not change it. But you can still read it. And that's what we're reading here. So we're going to print exactly up to the capacity of the printer. And this is an important one to check because it is very frequent that you will have something like this in your if statement. Is a fairly normal mistake to make, and then you'll see that it fails. And you will never be able to print the last page in your printer. Even when your printer has one page left of ink, if you have a check like this one, you won't be able to print it because 1 will be equal to 1, which is the capacity left. So you want to do, if the pages is greater than the capacity, you want to raise the error. So if pages is 1 and capacity is 1, you will still print. If pages is 1 and capacity is 0, then you won't print and you'll raise an error. Okay, so this is an important one to check, very frequent mistake. Next up, we could test the printer speed, and this is really what we're doing here. So you could write a separate message that says test printer speed, and then you can have a pages 10 and an expected message of printed 10 pages in 5.00 seconds. Then you'll get your result, which will be self.printer.print 10 really pages. And then self.assert equal the result and the expected message. I would do this instead of checking the message here, and then I would remove this and put it there. That way you have two tests that do two separate things. If you get an error because you run out of capacity just by printing 25 pages, even though the capacity is 300, then you're going to catch it with this test and not with this one. Similarly, for example, let's say that you set capacity to 300, but you have hard-coded capacity to 20 here, and then your test will fail. This one. Self.printer.print 25 fails, even though you've set capacity to 300 because you hard-coded it to 20 here. This could happen, for example, if you forget to make it equal to capacity, and instead you hard-code it to a value while you're developing the class. That's why I'm a big fan of having separate tests that do separate individual checks as opposed to one that does multiple things. Of course, sometimes you're not sure if your test is testing one thing or two things. It can be difficult to gauge, but don't worry too much about it. Just do the best you can, and I'm sure that over time you'll get better at it. Next up, let's test that the speed here, or how many seconds it takes, is always printed out to 2 decimal places and not, say, 10. So we will say that we've got a new printer called fast printer, that is another printer object, where the pages per second is 3.0 and the capacity is also 300. The pages we're going to print is 11, and the expected message is printed 11 pages in 3.67 seconds. This is important because the way that the Python will do it, if you divide 11 by 3.0, it'll be 3.66666667. And you don't want that normally when you're giving a message to a user. So we will say fastprinter.print pages, and then we will do self.assert equal the result and the expected. Okay, so run this and look at the tests pass, 5 out of 5. If you go back to your printer and you take away this 0.2f, you'll see that this test then fails. Because you get, first of all, 5.0 seconds instead of 5.00, and then you also get 3.66665. I thought it would be 7, but it is not. Okay, so this is why we have that. And these tests here, really both of these are testing something similar, but this one is more gauged to testing, making sure the speed is correct. This one is making sure that the decimals are correct when there would be many of them. Next up, we can test for multiple print runs, making sure that a printer can print multiple times in succession. And we can print up to, say, the limit of capacity. Then we can test multiple runs end up in error, where we essentially do the same thing, but the last one is 226. Or maybe we can even make it a bit more explicit, just like that. Alright, so here are a few of the tests that we've come up with just for this simple printer class. And remember, the purpose of the tests is twofold, or mostly twofold. The first purpose is to document and to show the reader what the thing you're testing does and how it behaves in different scenarios. So by looking at these tests here, you need to take your time to, of course, understand them, but you'll be able to glean that this printer has a print method that returns a message and that erases an error. Here's how it behaves when you go over the limit, and you can print exactly up to the limit, and you can do multiple print runs and so on. So it's a little bit like documentation. And if you're working on a team and you're working with other people, there'll be a lot of code in a large code base that you've never seen before. By looking at the tests in the large code bases, you can much more easily understand everything that's going on, as long as the tests are good, of course. The second purpose of tests is to check that the code works in the same way that it did the last time. So if somebody comes into your printer and makes a few changes, for example, if they change this print method so that it no longer raises an error, you almost certainly want your tests to fail. Because if they don't, and then you can see that it tells me that to fail. If your tests don't fail, it means that potentially in many places in your code, you could be depending on that error being raised, and you are none the wiser. You don't know if that error is being raised or not anymore if you don't have tests for it. So the tests, the second purpose of the tests is to keep you right in what you believe about your code. Of course, there is a third and final use of tests, which is that by writing tests, it will force you to write better code. If the code is very difficult to test, you're going to have problems testing it. And that means usually that the code is too complicated. So you should split it out into functions and test those separately, and so on. In the coming videos, we're going to look at how you can split your code into functions and how to test when you have multiple layers. So we're going to be using patching and mocking in order to do that. It's really simple. It looks complicated, but it really isn't. Thanks for joining me in this video. I'll see you in the next one.